Hi everybody, it's about time to start. I know we got a couple of chairs open, but I'm sure that those are going to get filled soon, but we're going to go ahead and start for the day. So really glad to have you all here. This is Sunday School at Water Mystic Shop. We're doing some cool things. If you notice, we're recording in the middle of the room now, so we're probably going to post this on the website, and also we're going to have the audio of it up on iTunes, so you don't have to take copious notes unless you're just wanting to set some of this information in and highlight it that you're really interested in and want to revisit later, or you want to ask questions about after the class. So, but it's really great to have you all here. Really nice to have everyone here. So, we're talking about a topic today that I have a lot of passion about and that I've used to great effect in my personal life. So, it's going to be a good class for us all. I don't know if any of you, I know the email that Kirsten sent out said to kind of bring some things that are related to your family or to ancestry. If you wanted to kind of dig around and find those things now, if you brought them, that'd be a cool time to do it and kind of hold on to it throughout the class. But I'm going to kind of start out the class with a little prayer. So I normally don't pray much. I normally don't start our classes with prayer. But this is a little bit of a different class. And it isn't that you have to pray alongside me or anything like that. It would probably be to your benefit if you did. At the very least, during the prayer, what I want you to do is open up your mind and your system to communication. That's it. Just communication. Just think about communication and what that looks like, right? Another thing I want you to focus on when I'm praying, and this is going to sound a little morbid, but it isn't, trust me. It's very wholesome. I want you to focus on the flow of your blood through your body. When you do that while I'm praying, I want you to focus on the sacred aspects of that. One of the main focuses in many traditions is the blood is the life. What does that even mean? How do we go into that? So that you know what I'm asking you to focus on. When I say the blood is the life, right? It's talking about an encompassing idea that everything you are, the signature of the being that you are in this lifetime, and how you can focus on transforming your life, embodying strength, grace, beauty, awe, right? The basis of being who you are. And I'm not talking about who you think you are. I'm talking about who you really are, right? Calling that in comes by focusing on the bloodline. Focusing on the power of your unique signature in this lifetime, right? So during this prayer, we're going to focus on amplifying that. We're going to focus on amplifying all the spiritual gifts you were born in this lifetime with. What it means to have impact with those, what it means to heighten them, what it means to amplify them in the being of who you are. And that's what it means to have an anchor for ancestry in your life. It's about amplifying your birthright. It's about amplifying everything that makes you who you are, you unique, beautiful individual, right? And melding it all into a spiritual practice that has impact, that has power, that can actually move physical reality for you, right? So a lot of us wake up, we go from 9 to 5, we kind of meander through life, right? We never have a deep connection to the self or to what brought us here, the lifetimes, the journey, the presencing. This is the time to start it. This is the time to amplify it, to focus on it. It's the reason why you're here in this class right now. Something told you to come because of an interest in this subject matter, right? So let's focus on amplifying your being through your bloodline. Focus on anchoring that energy that you carry with you, that beautiful, amazing energy that is unique to you, that is unique to your ancestry, bringing it forward into the physical form and taking notice of it for maybe even the first time in your entire life in a new way, and shedding light on what it can actually do for you. So as I pray, focus on the vision. Let it inform what you actually do with your reality, right, after the class today. I'll begin. I call upon the gates to open for every single person in this room, for communication to begin with our ancestors, with the sacred bloodlines that we carry. I call upon us to move forward in our unique offering of self in this lifetime, and that we establish a sacred connection with those who've gone before us, who've allowed us to have the journey we have now. May our connection to them be strong, be beautiful, and full of grace. May we honor one another and honor our ancestors in fullness, and create a connection that is real, that is strong, and brings forward the strength and the grace of who we really are. Thank you, ancestors, for being here. Help guide us. May we remain together in our journeys. So be it. Amen. So I want to start out today by going in a little bit about altars in general, right? It's one thing to talk about an ancestral altar. It's another thing entirely to understand what an altar is, why it's important, why we do this, what's going on, why we even have this discussion, right? So altars are extremely important because they serve as an anchor in the physical realm for everything that is ethereal and everything that is godlike, everything that is powerful, that is in the ether. You can even liken that into your thoughts, your ideas, your intuits, right? Your intuition and how it guides you and everything like that. That's positive about your life. That's strengthening about your life. That's beautiful about your life. That honors the journey you've had up until this point. What is that? What are the amazing things that have jettisoned you forward, the people you've met, the ideas they've conveyed, the epiphanies you've come to, the realizations that you've had, right? What does it mean to honor your strength? What does it mean to have something in your life that's a physical form of the feelings, of the thoughts, of the ideas, of beauty, grace, self-acknowledgement, strength, transformation, right? So real magic happens when we pull things from the thoughts, from the feelings, from the ether, and make them physical. That's real magic. So an altar is a physical representation of constant magic in the home. It creates a sacred space. It builds up energy for those great things about our journey that we often overlook. It's a reminder of those things, right? For self-compassion, for self-transformation, for the journey that you've carried up until this point. Like there's a lot you've had to overcome, each individual in this room, to even be here. Did you know scientifically, right? Let's just take it completely out of the spiritual aspect. Scientifically, numbers, the chances of you being a human being born in the known universe out of all the organisms you could have come to fruition as is 400 trillion to 1. So let that sink in for a minute. What does that even mean that you're here? 400 trillion to 1. Right? So that means, to me anyway, that every single one of us is extremely important. Extremely. Every single one of you that are watching or that are sitting in these chairs has an offering that could change everything. So why don't we reach that offering? Why don't we really connect with the awe, the grace, the strength, the beauty of the being, and change the world like Jesus did, or Buddha, or all these other people that we think about. It's because we don't give ourselves pause enough to bring things down into the physical form and touch them, that are full of glory, full of beauty, about the journey of the human existence. And in particular, our individual journeys. That has to happen if you want to change the world. If you really want to connect with the self, you have to start bringing things down from the God form, from the ether, from the thoughts that are beautiful and magnificent, and make them real. And everybody who's ever changed the world in some way, or had impact and been in service, right, with great success, they've all done that. They've had great thoughts. They've had great imaginations. And they've honored their journey enough to give pause and pull it down and make it real. And one of the very first practices, one of the easiest practices you can have in doing that, is making an altar. That is the physical representation of self-compassion, of honoring, of making something sacred in your life so that you can carry it forward. It anchors that practice down. That's what an altar can do for you. So altars are extremely important, right? So a physical representation of grace and self-compassion never hurt anybody. And so that's the beginning, right? That's like the first step that every single person in this room needs to do when they go home today if you don't already have one. You need an altar that honors your journey, right? So why an ancestral altar? If we've established that altars are really great, right, for our journey and what happens there, why do we need an ancestral altar? What's going on with that? Why is that important at all? And all of us show up with our different belief systems and our understandings of what ancestry means and all that good stuff. But there are certain energetic rules that exist in the universe that kind of like line up with the best practices that many cultures have found, that kind of pull together in like one little pool of like, wow, all that stuff really works in there. So when it comes to ancestors, and the reason why we need a connection with them and why that's so important is because you don't exist as an island unto yourself, right? Probably heard that phrase a lot. Nobody heals in a village, you know. We don't have a fulfilled life if we're just alone for our whole lives, right? So that expands in both directions, not only in our physical life as it is right now, but also where we've come from, right? So a lack of acknowledgement of that and a lack of access to the power in your bloodline and the uniqueness of who you are leaves out a really big rift of acceptance that we all have got to come to in order to evolve in a lifetime. So acceptance is a big word, right? Acceptance is huge. I had one of the greatest spiritual teachers I ever sat under. She looked around the room during one of our depth courses, just kicking our ass all over the place. We didn't know where we were. We were so altered. She looked around the room and said, you know, if I could just get you all to acceptance, that'd be half the battle. And unless you start to really, truly honor your ancestors during a lifetime when you come in, you'll never reach full acceptance. Why? Because your ancestry and your bloodline is what allowed you to journey this far. And also, there's a purpose why you were born in the family you're born in and carry forward the bloodline that you do, right? And it's up to you to find out what that is and what that journey looks like. So what I'm saying is, a spiritual practice that doesn't call in the strength and the grace and the uniqueness of your bloodline and amplifies the spiritual gifts and the unique spiritual cosmology that you were born with is bereft of about 60% of its strength. 60 to 70% of its strength, kind of how it feels anyway. No way to really measure that. But in other words, a spiritual practice without honoring that is missing a whole lot of power, a whole lot of psychology too. That whole chunk of acceptance that we have to get to. And also transmutation. That's a big word, but we're talking about transmuting the bloodline. right? So there's a lot of things our ancestors did that wasn't that great. A lot of them that it was fine, right? But it's our job in this lifetime, our responsibility as human beings, to transmute that bloodline and make some of it right and understand it. You don't even have to know the entire history of it, but engaging with it to the point to where you can at least transmute the energy of it, the feelings of it, how it carries forward. That's a huge movement. That's a really big part of a spiritual practice. And leaving it out in this lifetime stunts your growth. It stunts your evolution. So it's really, really important to bring that forward, right? So that's why an ancestral altar, having an anchor for transmuting that energy, having an anchor in physical reality for carrying it forward, right? And having access to that kind of power is so, so important. So if you do any kind of energy work, if you're any kind of energy healer, or you're developing your spiritual gifts, right? You have to have access to your bloodline to do that. It's really, really important. If you want them to evolve, you want to have self-mastery over your spiritual gifts so you can use them and be in service with them, accessing your bloodline is of the utmost importance. You'll never reach true self-mastery with your spiritual gifts without accessing the bloodline. You're blocked from it. And your spiritual gifts, right, go into how you experience your compass, your way of understanding in the world. It's your inner mother, right? Taps into that a little bit. And so you're leaving off that whole part of yourself if you don't really access the bloodline too. Really important movement for your evolution, for carrying it forward, right? If you want to transform, if you want your life to be different, this is a key element, right? Not saying you can't do it without it. You certainly can. But it would have been so much more if you would have included this element. Okay? Because it adds so much to those aspects of the inner mother, of the spiritual gifts, of the compass. So highly, highly, highly important to anchor that kind of energy in the home. Make it a part of your spiritual practice, a part of the way that you move forward in sacred movement, an understanding of honoring the journey and honoring your bloodline. And then you can actually access the power of it, amplify the spiritual gifts, be more in service. Then intuition comes on board more. Be able to speak into people's lives a little bit better and also listen a little bit better, right? You start to see all those things come on board if you do them properly. So that's why an ancestral altar versus just a regular altar. And an ancestral altar has to be completely separate. It has to be dedicated. So the way an ancestral altar kind of works and how it looks is really important to call in and anchor that energy specifically, right? So what you'll have to do is you'll have to go back home and kind of, or even during this class, you can kind of tune in and kind of think, who's with me? Right? Just take a moment and just be quiet and say, you know, I don't really know who's with me or who would be with me or what's happening with all that. Maybe if I go home and look at pictures or something like that. It can even be family members you don't know anything about. Like one of the people that are really, really with me when I tuned in is my great-great-grandfather. I never met the guy, but he's really helping me out in this lifetime, right? Once I got a beat in on that kind of energy, I was like, whoa, he's really with me. That's super cool. And I even got a reading to back it up with someone who's really knowledgeable and I know is legit. They're not going to tell me a bunch of BS. You know, you got to watch that. But yeah, he's really, really with me, but I never met him. And I was able to tune into that by not only listening to stories about my family from my parents, but also looking at pictures, right? So if you go home and look at pictures, or if you have family heirlooms that have been passed down and that kind of thing, there's a reason why those family heirlooms are probably still with you. They might really be with you and guiding you, whoever instigated those family heirlooms, whoever had a lot of contact with them. You know, that kind of thing. So you really want to tune in and see who's with you. And then beyond that, you want to put either the family heirlooms that belong to them or pictures of them on your ancestral altar, right? And you want an odd number of cups of water on the ancestral altar. Don't put one, I would put more than that. You want 3, 5, 7, whatever works for you. You're going to need to change out that water every 3 days or so you don't want to put too many cups of water on there. I have 3 cups of water on mine, right? And the basic setup I'm telling you is kind of like you can look up pictures of Bovedas online, Boveda. That's from Santeria. Okay, I'm not a Santeria. I don't claim to be. But I think that their setup for ancestral altars is one of the best energetic setups I've ever seen. It really calls in the energy very well, right? And it's a good way of honoring the ancestors. Having fresh flowers on there every once in a while, in particular when you set it up the first time, would be nice. Having items on the altar that the ancestors like if you have like a great uncle that's with you and he liked to smoke, having some tobacco on there would be cool, you know. And it isn't that in the spirit world he likes to smoke now, okay? What it is the energetic link to drawing his energy even closer to you so that he can help you out more. Does that make sense? So it's about setting up energetic links. These offerings are not worship, you know, that kind of thing. This is about setting up ties so that they have a greater link way to you, so that they can help you out better. So that your prayers have more power, so that they can give you access to more of the bloodline, so that you can have more access to the spiritual gifts that are in the family line, right? So you start to develop mastery that way. That's what this is about. It isn't about worshiping your ancestors, although it's really, really great to honor them. If you want to consider that worship, then cool. But honoring the ancestors is really important, because that, once again, it's a give and take and it's acceptance, right? But also it establishes the link of energy with them stronger. It calls it in better. So honoring them with fresh flowers, water for connection, incense, having a candle burning on the altar on a consistent basis, right? I have a big candle holder that I'm not worried about tipping over and things like that, so it's not going to burn the house down. I leave a nice candle burning on a consistent basis there, right? But you don't have to keep it constantly burning. It's just something that, you know, when you have it, buy a candle, set it up and let it burn. It's good to have that element there. And these are all ways of honoring the ancestors. Also set up the energetic link ties closer and closer. So what's so important is connection. So I mention this in almost every class I do, but one of the most important things you have access to, what is your birthright, what is all of our God-given, whatever you want to call God, all of our created aspects, is connection. As a human being, what you have access to is to connect to things greater and greater and greater. And the more you can connect with something, the more you can make magic happen. The more you can pull out power, right? So that if I was to connect with a crystal in here so deep that it became a part of my being, people would say, whoa, that's amazing. If that crystal just became a part of who you are, right? That's real magic. Or if I connected to my car to the point to where I could speak to it and it could drive itself, right? People would say, whoa, man, that's magic. That's super cool. So that's how we define magic in our minds, if you think about it. Like if I could connect with lightning so much I could make it happen at the snap of my fingers, that'd be magic, right? I'd have a real connection with lightning. I'd be like, boom, watch that. It's magic, boom, right? Magic happens in connection. The deeper you connect, the more you can strengthen those energetic links, the more that you can make that connection happen, the more you can create amazing sacred space with the ancestors that jettisons your life, that moves it forward, that you can call in times of need. But it's just like anything else. If I had a friend down the road and he was my best friend and I asked him for $100, he'd probably give it to me no problem, right? It wouldn't even be an issue. It'd be like, whoa, you know, you need $100, no big deal. He knows where I live. We have an established connection, right? Everything's good to go. He doesn't need to vet me, okay? He's known me for years. He'll know I'll pay him back when I can. But if I ask a complete stranger for $100, you're like, man, I don't know about that. I don't know where you live. I don't know if you're ever gonna pay me back. I don't know what kind of character you got. I don't know who you are, right? The same thing works in the spirit world. If you have ancestors that are here to help you out, right? But you haven't taken the time to develop the relationship, establish the link and ties, and they don't know the direction you're going because you don't communicate with them on a consistent basis and things like that, how are they going to help you out? It's going to be harder for them to help you out. They want to, because The way it works, at least that's the way I've experienced it so far in the spirit world, is the more that we transform, the more we evolve, become better human beings, the more the people and the things and the spirits that are here to help us out that we were born with in this lifetime, the more they transform too. Right? So they want to help us out because it gives them an opportunity to transform. It gives them an opportunity to move forward in the spirit world too. So when you set up these energetic links and you make them strong, it gives them more of an opportunity to reach our lives better, and they can help us out more. So when you go around needing for something, they're like, hey, I can help you out, no problem. I know exactly where you're at. I don't have to search for you or anything, right? So that's another important thing about Ancestor Altars, is it serves to strengthen all those links, right? So that's one of the most important things you can do. Let me see where we're at on time. Right? So now that we have an Ancestor Altar built, and now that we have an established definition of what a good one looks like, right? And the importance of it, I'm going to tell you how to take advantage of it, right? Because that's really important. It doesn't matter. It's cool that you have it up and going and the ancestors can reach out and bless you on a consistent basis. But how do you really take advantage of it? How do I get this going where I can really access my bloodline and it can make a difference in my physical reality and amplify the spiritual things that I was born with, in this lifetime through this ancestry? Like, how do I actually do all that? So one of the cool things to do is doing a ritual around the Ancestral Altar. And doing a ritual around an Ancestor Altar is, you aren't like, for those of you that aren't into rituals and things like that, this isn't something that you have that you do that's going to be, you aren't going to call up the devil or anything like that, okay? This is just something that gives you greater access to the way that you interact and the way that you honor the ancestors. It will amplify the energy, it'll amplify your connection, and therefore to amplify the way that the ancestors can bless your life, if that makes sense. So one of the things you want to do is create a sacred space around the altar. That means make sure it's really clean, make sure it's nice to maneuver in, make sure that it's something that feels good to you. Oftentimes that means it's going to look good too, but the important thing is the feeling. Make sure that the space feels really nice, that it feels good. You can sage it, you can do Palo Santo with it, you can do all kinds of things like that. One of the things I have on my Ancestral Altar is Florida water. I really love Florida water. I think it's great. If you don't know what Florida water is, Florida water, it's a very interesting story behind it. It's manufactured in New Jersey. But the cool thing about it is it's sold the world over and used in spiritual practice, such as Santeria. It's used by shamans in Peru. It's used the world over. I mean, it's used in voodoo. There's so many different spiritual traditions that venerate this Florida water that's manufactured in New Jersey. And the reason why is because it was made at the turn of the century when Spiritism was really alive, right? They were doing seances, they were playing with Ouija boards, they were doing all these things. They're trying to connect with spirit. There's this whole renaissance around it. And so when this really intuitive person came up with the formula, Florida water, and started, presented it to the company, was in the company, and started making it. And when they did, there's like the shamans and the spiritual people who could see, who were sensitive, said, whoa, this stuff is made right. It actually cleanses a person's aura. This is super cool. And so they started using it, and they've been using it ever since. So if you go down to Peru, you do an ayahuasca ceremony, you'll see that lion on their altar, this manufactured thing from New Jersey. You'll see it in Santeria, you see it in voodoo, like I said. It's amazing that it's made those rounds, but it's obviously just made by an intuitive person who came up with a formula that actually works to cleanse the aura, right? So it's a good cleansing product, energetically. So I have that sitting on my altar, and normally I'll just pat the back of my neck with it and come up to the crown, right? Because it's part of the way that I move in a sacred space with my altar, right? I clean myself, I clean the space, I usually burn some Palo Santo, and for me that feels good. And you'll have to define what feels good for you, all right? So whatever feels nice and sacred and beautiful about that moment that you're about to engage in a ceremony, right, that honors your journey and that honors those that are here to help you on your journey. Right? And so what you'll do is you'll set all that up, and it's about intention. What are you wanting to get out of this, right? This interaction. Attention, right? So I want you to go into it with a hyper sense of understanding your environment and listening to your body. Does your body tense up? Does it relax? How is your breath, right? Wiggle your toes. You know, like pay attention to things you never did before when you move into this environment. What you're doing is you're setting up your mind to think of the ceremony in a way that's different than how you operate and maneuver outside of it. So you want us to pay attention in a special way. How you move around the altar, what happens there, right? You can even move slower, right? And you're doing everything. You might feel a little hokey, but it actually sets you up in a different space, right? Like this is different. We're moving into something different. So that's what you want to do. You want to change the way the mind is perceiving things. And then what I would do is I would say a prayer or write down on a sheet of paper, right? Ways in which you want your life to move forward and set it on the Ancestral Altar. And then set in front of it and meditate. Breathe, focus on your breath, and just notice the energy of that space. You've created a unique thing, right? You created your own ancestral altar that's probably different than anybody else's in the whole world. It has photos on it that are unique to you. It has a tracing and a signature that's unique to your bloodline. It's honoring your journey and your ancestors. And you're transmuting, you're the only person, right, at that point in time, transmuting your bloodline and really calling it forward and asking for your spiritual gifts and your way of being in service to be amplified and to be transformed. It's a very beautiful moment, right? So sit in that. See the beauty of it. See where you come from. What has been your journey so far? The rough times, the beautiful times, all the ways in which you've had help, all the chances in which you've had to open up, and you did or you didn't. Acknowledge it all. See it all for what it is, right? During that meditation. You sit there and feel the support of your bloodline, the strength of your bloodline, the grace of your uniqueness in that moment, right? And I guarantee you, if you're doing this on a consistent basis, at least twice a week or so, or once a week, you'll change your entire life. Because you're actually touching extremely high vibrational emotions at that point. Gratitude, honor, beauty, grace, and you're making it a part of who you are. And you're honoring your journey. You're honoring the ups and downs, and you're coming into acceptance of it all. And honoring our ancestors gives us a chance to do that, right? Normally we look at the shitty times like, wow, what else are you going to do with it? You just throw your hands up, right? But this gives you a chance to have acceptance around it. This gives you a chance to have power over it, actually. Because if you can gain enough neutrality to have acceptance over the tough times, they no longer have power over you. Think about that for a minute. You just transmuted really awful times into something that you have acceptance over, and that is a part of your journey. And you did it with the help and the strength and the grace of your bloodline, of your ancestors in this moment in the ceremony. So sit in the wonder of being able to do that. Sit in the awe of it, right? Know that you are supported. Know that you have grace and strength in that moment. That you're not alone. That's a beautiful movement. So sit in that grace. Sit in the energy of it during the ceremony. And then you'll oftentimes in the ceremony, by ringing a bell or by having something there that kind of cleans out it's an ending to the ceremony. You can either snap or clap, or you can stand up and thank the ancestors and then stomp on the ground a little bit, kind of ground out the energy, but that'd be the ending to the ceremony. I like bells. I like little vibrational things at the end of ceremonies to kind of clear the space and note that it's the end of the ceremony, but you'll want an ending to it, and you'll want to do it in gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to transmute all this. And that strengthens and bolsters your life. Time and time again, the more you do it, the more you'll feel more courage, the more you'll feel more grace, more acceptance, the more you feel strong, the more you do that. So do we have any questions about anything that I've covered so far? Sure. Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll just repeat the question. Okay, we'll go right here.
So, for me personally, I have abusive parents, and so I don't have a relationship with them anymore. And I don't really know my family history. I don't have to prove anything.
Right.
So, in essence like that, somebody who's maybe adopted and doesn't know what their line is, how would somebody like myself or somebody like that go through that process of creating the altar?
Sure. Yeah, it's a common question. The question was if you've been in an abusive relationship with your ancestors or your parents, how do you find out more information, or how do you even go forward with anything like that, or if you've been adopted? And it's a good question. It's something that I find a lot in this kind of work. But the thing is that if you were to, the most important thing is that when you set up an altar like that, right, what I would do is I would set up the altar, and you don't have to go through your parents to do this, right? Do you have any family heirlooms or anything like that, or any pictures that you have from anywhere? No, nothing? Okay, cool. So what you can do is set up the altar, set up the water, and then I would set up something that represents ancestry for me. It can be a symbol, it can be wood, it could be whatever wood that you carve into or something like that that represents like lineage. That represents your journey at this point in your bloodline, right? If you're open to it, you could even prick your finger and like your actual blood, put it on a piece of wood and set it on the altar, and like a very beautiful piece of wood, and that kind of thing. And what that would do is it call in the energy for bloodline right then and there as an anchor, right? Make it very beautiful and everything like that, something that feels good to you. And then I would go through the ceremony like I just described it on a weekly basis. And what will happen is, eventually, it will come to you who's with you. It won't even be a question, you'll know. If you do that, if you stay committed to it, and you go after it, like, I want to transmute this, my relationship with my ancestors has been really shitty, up until this point, it hadn't been that great, but I am up to the task of healing this, and moving forward through it, right? Because you'll never get anywhere running away from it, right? We both know that, all of us still carry abuse with us. And so what we have to do is, we have to move through it. And this is one of the beautiful ways that you can move through it, as opposed to like, just having shitty feelings every once in a while about it. You know what I'm saying? So this will invite grace into the movement. This will invite acceptance into the movement a little bit more the more you do it. You don't have to have acceptance at first. The first you can be as angry as hell. Be like, I'm here, damn it. You can move toward it like that, but I would still just move toward it. Just continue to move toward it. Don't give up, because that kind of movement is what's going to help you gain power over this, as opposed to letting it rule your life on the back end. Because that's what it's doing. That's what abuse does for everybody. It all rules our life in the background. And so this is a way of bringing it forward and moving through it with grace and with help and with strength from the ancestors that have passed on before your parents, that are here to help you out, that are here to love you, that are here to help you move through that kind of shit. Make sense? Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, right here, I think that's the next one. That's a wonderful question. So glad you brought it up. The question was, what direction do we set the altar? West is the direction for this altar. And it isn't the direction that you face the altar. You, as the practitioner, wants to be facing west. So you set the altar in the westernmost part of the room, right? And it's actually going to be facing east, but you're going to be facing west, right? When you stand in front of your ancestral altar, you want to be facing west. And so that's very important because it really helps anchor the energy more, right? Because the sun sets in the west. So the west is about appropriate timing. The west is about the cycles of life. The west is about death and rebirth, right? And so that's what the west is about. And so that's where you want the ancestral altar to go. That's where you want to be facing to call in this kind of energy. So, yes?
Question, not as much related to spiritual part,
Certainly that not, the question was, would knowing your DNA and going through that process enhance the altar? And I believe it would. It gives you a greater sense of connection to your ties, where you came from. You know, like it would give you, so one of the most powerful things about the human experience is our understanding of story, right? And this starts to give you context. It starts to give you your story. Like this journey that your ancestors had coming over from whatever island to here or whatever other land. And you know what I'm saying? You can kind of even imagine the story while you're in front of your ancestral altar and think, wow, you know, for me to have this life, we've come a long way. Thank you, ancestors.
Story, so I kind of connected to that a little bit as a way of, you know, just knowing more than just the ones I remember.
Right. I think that that's an awesome, and that would be another way that you could connect to. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Piggybacking off that, if you have the results of that, like if you printed it out or wrote it out, would that be something you could put on the altar?
Certainly. So the question was, you know, could you, if you had something like that, you could put it on the altar? You could, certainly. The thing that's really powerful for ancestral altars is the story and the understanding of the story in yourself when you face it. You know, but having it written out and put there would be fine. It wouldn't hurt, certainly. Is somebody over here, I think? Okay, go ahead.
I was going to ask if you might have like negative or negative ancestry, or you just don't know if it's like safe to contact. Would you feel like the altar would only invite the positive, or even if it's negative, like could you work on cleaning?
Yeah. So her question was, if you have negative ancestry, how do you approach the altar, essentially? And that's the point of the altar, is gaining acceptance around the negativity of the ancestry. At least it's one of the big points, right? It's moving through that and having a movement that engages, like, you know, okay, my ancestors weren't the best in the world, but they brought me this far, and I want to have gratitude around that movement, gratitude for my journey. Even though they might have been shits, it's cool. I'm not going to be shit in this lifetime. I'm going to be in service. I'm going to be, you know, the fulfillment of my real being, and I'm going to honor the journey so far, and this is part of it, right? And so that would be the way to do it, but here's the thing about ancestors. I have found oftentimes that when they die, they aren't shitty people anymore. I have found most of the time that they're working on themselves too, and they realize that their life was, you know, not that great. In fact, some people's lives, whatever you believe around this, but some people's lives, I believe, are here just to transmute a bunch of BS, right? That's in the bloodline or whatever, and so they act out, and they end up being shitty people, but that doesn't mean that they're actually innately bad people. That makes sense? And so when they die, they transform back into this amazing person who transmuted all this to the bloodline. Make sense? And so connecting with them, I have found that connecting with ancestors, especially ones you know are with you, is never bad. It's always great. It's always amazing and transformative for most people once they get a good link established. So, yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes you can actually be your ancestor and be in your bloodline.
True. Yeah.
So it's interesting, and it's like you could have been that shitty person in your bloodline back then.
Yeah. And my wife is highly psychic, and she just pointed out, she probably intuited before that she's been her own ancestor before. So, and that accentuates my point even greater, is that having acceptance around your ancestry is almost like having acceptance around yourself. Like if you push away your ancestry so much and they're all shits and all this stuff, then what happens is you lose an element of the self, and you don't have acceptance around the self where you can't heal it. It's done, you know. But if you can start to move toward it in a way where you start to have acceptance around it, then you can start to have power, right? You can start to amplify the gifts you were born with, the spiritual direction, you know, what you were meant to transmute for this family in this lifetime. All that stuff happens when you start to anchor it in this life with the physical ancestral altar and work it. You know, so I think she was next. No, but
I have two questions that you can answer both, that's okay. The first one is, what specifically is the water for? And the second one is, in the next modality, so that it's drinking energy with your ancestral altar, how would you practice that?
that's amazing. That's good. So the question was, how does water play into the whole thing? And can you mix modalities by mix, like say for instance, using Reiki on the water and things like that? And the answer is absolutely you can use Reiki on the water or on any part of the ancestry. Ancestral altar, it greatly enhances everything, because that energy, even though your channeling is coming through your being and through the understanding of the ancestry, the journey through your bloodline, it's one of your gifts, right? And so you're presenting it to the ancestor altar in service, and it's also going to be reflected back to you too, right? Because you're going to create a greater energetic link. So it's also going to create beauty and grace and all kinds of things. It's amazing that you would do that, so it's super cool, right? The water is there traditionally to enhance connection. So say, for instance, if you were practicing magic in a room and you wanted to do magic for spirit connection, if you just fill up the whole room with water, glasses of water, you would have a connection, there's no question. Water is really, really connecting for human beings, especially when it comes to connecting from here to another realm that we have a hard time seeing. Yeah. Well, it brings it down, right, into like a physical form. So that's what's happening there. Yes?
I have a two-part easy question, I think.
Okay.
So one is, my first question is, are there any crystals that you recommend that would amplify this experience? And the second one is, where do you get Florida Jersey water? Or what is it?
So the question was, do we have any crystals that would enhance this experience? And where do you get Florida water? So we have Florida water on the shelf right back there. We're hoping to have some homemade stuff soon, but that's used the world over. On bovedas, everywhere. So you can certainly use that. There's all kinds of crystals that enhance this experience. Selenite enhances the experience. It makes the altar have a very clean energy to it. Another great one would be serpentine. Serpentine. And it isn't serpentine. It's that one. What's the name of that one beside you? No. Will Smith, of course, the green one. The green one? No, it's right beside it. Okay. It is serpentine. I didn't know for sure if my mind is going out or not, but serpentine would really help. It really helps connect with the earth in general and earthly realms. Serpentine would be really, really good. So selenite, serpentine, smoky quartz would be excellent for it. Smoky quartz really helps and enhances everything that an ancestral altar setup would do. Another great one would be lapis. Lapis would be excellent for it. Yeah, you're welcome. Let me get one over here, then I'll come back to you. Yes, Alex, go ahead.
So you talked about the water aspect. Can you talk about maybe how to use the other three elements with your altar? So just talk a little bit about, I guess, fire and
Sure.
a little bit about wood with maybe carving or
Sure. So the other elements are there in the ancestor altar. So the question was how to use all the elements, or if all the elements would enhance what the ancestor altar does. And I think certainly it would. The experience of who we are and how we're made is from the four elements, right? And if you want to include the fifth element of spirit, you could do that. But it's water, air, fire, earth. That's a hermetic understanding of things. And that's a whole other class. But anything that involves those elements is going to enhance communication with other realms, right? Because all those elements are transmutative elements. In other words, they're components that have multiple aspects to them, right? So water isn't just water. Water washes upon the shore, right? So it's the meeting of the earth and the water. Fire has to have oxygen, so it's air and another element. You know, like there's a lot of transmutation going on and traveling back and forth in the elements with that. And so anytime you include it on an altar, it's going to make it more powerful. It's going to amplify the energy of it. And in my description of building a Veda, it's a little bit heavy on the water side for a reason. So you want the connection to be really strong. Normally you want all the elements to be balanced, right? And so normally you want an equal amount of water versus an equal amount of stones on the altar versus a feather for, not like a pack of feathers for air, that kind of thing. But on this particular altar, to answer your question, you want it to be water heavy. It's already going to have fire. You need to keep the candle burning on there as much as you can, and the incense. So the incense is fire and air together, right? So there isn't too much air on there, but that's by design, right? So that's kind of how it plays out. Any other questions? Time for one more question, and I think, wait, I haven't got to you yet. If you want to ask. Okay. Can you speak up just a little bit? Yeah. So cemetery dirt is really interesting, and it's really great to put on an ancestral altar, but only cemetery dirt from that particular ancestor. Okay? Or one that you know is helping out, right? It might not come forward and whatnot, but I wouldn't put just any old graveyard dirt on an ancestor altar. There's reasons for that. I mean, and legitimate reasons, and once again, that's a whole nother class that I could go into, when like if you're looking at spell work or anything else like that. But just know that it's kind of dangerous actually to do that, unless you know the ancestor, unless you know their energies with you. You know what I'm saying? Because what you're doing when you're doing that is you're increasing the energetic tie between you and the ancestor even so much more, because in death you've got an element of them there on the altar. That's really powerful, but only for an ancestor that you can get a hold of like that, right? But any old graveyard dirt, what happens is you increase the energetic tie between someone you don't know. So you don't want that, because you don't know what kind of person they were, and if they're still earthbound or whether they moved on. Typically the ancestors that show up for you, right, for an ancestor altar, the reason why this is completely safe is because if they show up, right, and you feel them with you, and it feels good when you look at the picture and when you sense into it and you have them on your altar, then that means that they aren't earthbound anymore, right? They've moved on. They're working on themselves. They're here to help you out, all that good stuff. If you take any old graveyard dirt, you don't know what that person's did, if they moved on, or what kind of state they're in other words, right? So I wouldn't just take any old graveyard dirt, No, yeah. Use your intuition for sure, but use your brain too. Like that's kind of silly, When it comes to ancestor altars, that's the last thing I'll leave you with. Don't believe everything you read on the internet. If you have any questions, email me, and we can go from there. If you've got any questions after the class, I'll be here for that too. So it's really nice to have you all. We have to wrap things up. Thank you so much for coming. It's been an amazing class, at least for me. I hope you got a lot out of it. Have a beautiful day.
And if you guys want to come next week, we've got a really special guest. Her name is Jamie Butler, and she's a very well-known psychic medium, and she's going to be discussing how to connect with spirit. And so if you're into this ancestral altar situation, I think that would be a great supplement to this information on how to connect with deceased loved ones. And then if you visit our website and click on our event page, we've got such a killer lineup. Kirsten has been working really hard at getting some of the most prestigious people in their fields into the shop to do these classes. So I hope that you guys continue to join us. So have a happy